Commander Kalen Rowe wakes up aboard a drifting ship, alone, outside of time, beyond the stars. Something alive surrounds the vessel and speaks to him through structure, not words. This isn't just a signal. It's the remnants of a civilization that became a question. He could turn back, but instead, he becomes part of the answer. Because someone has to remember what can't be explained. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe. He woke up before the others. Long before. The cryo field had failed in silence. No alarms. No decompression hiss. No flickering emergency lights. Just a shift in pressure, subtle, almost intimate, and the sense of breath returning to lungs that shouldn't have remembered how. Commander Kalen Rowe stared at the lid of the pod, heart pounding like it hadn't in years. Frost clung to his eyelashes. The metal above him was dimly lit from the auxiliary circuit. Emergency mode. The kind that only activated if the core had gone dark. His mouth tasted of metal and dust. He tried to sit up. Muscles resisted. But the pain was good. Real. A tether to a body that had once commanded fleets. That had chosen this mission not because of duty, but because he wanted to forget what the war made of him. The cryopod lid creaked open. No noise from the others. Rows of identical chambers surrounded him in the dimness. Silent. Sleeping. Or worse. Rowe tried the comms. Dead. The ship, Virelia, had been meant to run without manual input. Fully automated. 53 crew in stasis, guided across the deep void toward the Triangulum Archive. A mission of recovery. Archaeology. No risk. And yet here he was, breathing again. Alone. He stood, unsteady. His breath fogged in the cold. A line of red emergency lights pulsed along the corridor, guiding him, or warning him. He walked toward the core. Not because he wanted to. Because something felt off. It wasn't just the failure. It was the quiet. A kind of silence he hadn't heard since the dead orbital station at Icar 9, where every body had been frozen mid-scream, and not a single system malfunction was ever found. This silence felt the same. Too careful. Too watched. He passed through the mid-deck. Doors half open. A few personal lockers spilled open. Items strewn across the floor in slow, unnatural patterns, as if gravity had been arguing with itself. When he reached the bridge, he stopped cold. The windows were dark. Not opaque. Not shuttered. Just wrong. Outside, the stars were missing. There was no sky. Only a soft black field that shimmered faintly, as if some massive surface pressed close against the hull, curving gently, like the inside of a sphere too large to comprehend. Rowe's breath caught. This wasn't space. It was containment. Virelia wasn't where it should have been. He approached the terminal, fingers trembling. The interface booted slowly, struggling to reconcile corrupted location data. Navigational error. Star charts, no match. Temporal drift, plus or minus unknown. External signature, unreadable. Primary system status, offline. Mission timer, null. Null. Not zero. Not failed. Just not there. As if time itself had been erased. Rowe opened the manual override. Tried accessing the black box logs. Nothing. The last recorded entry was dated 3 years before the launch. Impossible. The ship had departed 22 years ago. He activated the internal scan. One life signature. His own. The others, all 52 pods, were listed as present, but unreadable. He turned to go back. To check them. To wake someone. Anyone. But stopped when the console flickered. A new message appeared. You woke too soon. Rowe froze. That wasn't a system message. It was a transmission. Direct. No signature. He typed back. Who is this? No reply. Then, don't wake them yet. It's not safe. A low hum began beneath his feet. Not machinery. Not engines. Something outside. Something alive. He stared at the message long after the screen went dark. Don't wake them yet. It's not safe. Rowe wasn't a man given to superstition. He'd grown up on colony stations where superstition got people killed. You didn't pray to metal. You understood it, learned its weight, its fracture points, its betrayal curves. But this felt like something older than malfunction. Older than language. He moved back through the corridors. The hum hadn't stopped. It didn't grow louder. It grew closer, not spatially, but emotionally, as if whatever caused it was learning him as he walked, tuning itself to his heartbeat, matching breath to breath. He reached the cryo bay. Rows of pods glimmered under the emergency light. Most were fogged over from interior ice bloom, the sort of thing that only happened when internal biometrics lost sync with the central stasis clock. Dangerous. Potentially fatal. But every one of them still red-green. All except one. Pod 19. Lieutenant Irel Jane. Medic. Exobiologist. And the only person on this crew who had ever worked with Rowe before. She had volunteered for this mission because he was on it. Her pod was flickering amber. The system tried to display vitals, but the signal pulsed erratically, like something inside was interfering with the scan. Rowe approached slowly. Irel, he whispered, fogging the curved glass. She didn't move, but her eyes were open. Not wide, not panicked, Just open. And not seeing. He tapped the console. Awakening sequence inhibited. Manual override. Enabled. Warning. Unknown core stability. Biofeedback signal unsynchronized. She was alive. But wrong. He reached out to override, then paused. The message came back to him. Don't wake them yet. Whoever, whatever, had sent it knew. It had access. Or worse, presence. Something integrated with the ship, with the system, with him. He looked back at her still face behind the glass, then pulled his hand away. Not yet. Instead, he accessed the medical database. Tried to find previous interactions with her pod. What he found was unsettling. Logs had been altered. Timestamps looped. Notes corrupted. There were duplicate entries for maintenance scans that hadn't occurred. And one particular message, buried in system garbage, repeating itself silently. She saw it too. Ro recoiled. He exited the bay. The corridor lights dimmed as he passed, not randomly, but deliberately. Each panel flickered just after he stepped away, in sequence, as if being watched by something that only blinked when he wasn't looking. He made his way toward the server core. Engineering deck. Access level 7. Normally restricted during long-term transit. Now wide open. The walls here were warm. Not to the touch, to the sense. Something radiated through them, like being near a heartbeat in a body that had no organs. The door to the main system's hub was ajar. Inside, silence. And the console. It had changed. Not in shape, not in code, in interface. The language wasn't standard galactic. Not even old Earth-root dialects. It was something new. Or very, very old. He didn't read it. He understood it. Not fluently. Not consciously. Like a dream half-remembered. Already decaying even as it revealed itself. Connection confirmed. The display shifted. Now it showed a shape. Not a symbol. A configuration. 3 circles. Interlocked. Moving out of sync. Surrounded by fractal growth, like root systems or nervous tissue. Then a phrase beneath them. It is not a place. It is a question. Ro stepped back. He wanted to believe it was just an AI loop, some failed echo from the pre-launch archive. But the ship hadn't been designed for emergent interaction. It wasn't sentient. It wasn't capable of this kind of contact. Unless the Virelia had gone somewhere it wasn't meant to go. He initiated a hard scan of external structures. It took 5 minutes. At the end of the scan, the interface showed him what it saw. The ship was no longer in real space. It was embedded in something else. An object, not natural, not mechanical. It had mass, but not geometry. Form, but no fixed volume. It enclosed the ship completely. And it was growing. Ro leaned closer. There was motion in the scan. Not noise. Not radiation. Structure. Shifting just outside perception. Almost watching. Another message appeared. It wakes when we do. It feeds on awareness. Stay still. Stay sleeping. He ran. Back through the halls. The cryo bay came into view just as the alarms began. Muffled, corrupted, stuttering like they were trying not to alert. Pod 19. Irel's pod. The lid was opening. Not by system command. From the inside. He reached her just as her fingers gripped the edge. Her eyes, still distant, still clouded, locked onto him. And she said a name. Not his. Not hers. A name in a language he didn't know, but that somehow he'd heard before. Behind his eyes. In his dreams. Long before he ever boarded the ship. She whispered the name again. Softly. Without focus. As if she was reciting something not meant to be heard aloud. Ro froze. The sound itself felt wrong. Not just unfamiliar, incompatible with speech. Like it had too many syllables, or none at all. Like it had come from somewhere that didn't have language, only the memory of it. Irel leaned forward. Her skin was pale, but dry. Not frostbitten. Not shaking. She should have been disoriented. Violent. Cryo-wake procedures were brutal when unscheduled. But she was calm. Focused. Her eyes darted slightly, not at him, but around him. As if measuring something else. Do you know where we are? He asked. She tilted her head. The threshold, she murmured. It's here. Ro crouched beside her, gripping the side of the pod. What threshold? But she didn't answer. Instead, she reached up and gently pressed her fingers against his sternum. You woke too soon, she whispered. It noticed. That's why it pulled. What pulled? She looked at him, finally, directly. The question. Ro didn't speak for a long time. His hand rested on hers, not squeezing, not pushing away. Just grounding. Then, softly. What do you remember? Irel closed her eyes. Dreams, she said. That weren't dreams. A space that was shaped by thought. But not ours. A pause. A breath. They never built anything. Not like we do. They became structure. Memory. Form. A civilization that encoded itself into the medium of attention. She opened her eyes again. They called it the fold. We translated it as archive. But that's not right. It's not a vault. It's an interface. We're not observing it. It's observing us. To learn what shape to take. Ro stood. The hum in the station was louder now. Not decibels. Pressure. Like standing inside a throat preparing to speak. And then, as if on cue, the light shifted. Soft blue. All at once. System-wide. Not emergency lighting. Not diagnostics. This was design. A color too human to be random, but too deliberate to be human-made. He helped her out of the pod. Her legs held. She moved like someone who'd walked this corridor already many times. Ro checked the internal vitals. The other pods remained stable. For now. But something had changed. The power draw across the stasis grid had dropped by 17%. That was impossible. Either the grid was off, or it was on. No fractional drain should exist. Unless something else was stabilizing it. They moved toward the observatory together. Neither of them spoke. Irel's breath came steady, her steps measured. And Ro's thoughts began to drift, pulled by the same rhythm that guided the lights, the hum, the silence. When the door to the observatory slid open, they stopped in unison. The window wasn't black anymore. The stars were back. But not stars. Not real ones. They looked constructed. Perfect. Too perfect. Spaced with impossible symmetry, glowing with a kind of inner breath, pulsing like 1,000 eyes sinking their blinks. And at the center, a shape. Circular. Fractal. Growing. Ro stepped forward slowly. That's not outside, he murmured. Irel nodded. It's through. What does that mean? She didn't answer. Because the shape had begun to move. Not rotate. Shift. Its edges unfolded in new dimensions, angles rearranging like a thought taking form. Ro's mind screamed to recognize it, to categorize it, but there was no metaphor available. No reference. Only one sensation. This thing, whatever it was, wanted him to understand. It was trying. Like a language teaching itself in real time based on how he reacted. What is it showing us? He asked. Not showing, Irel said. Mirroring. She stepped closer. Do you remember the object we were sent to find? Ro nodded. Triangulum archive. Long-range remnant signal. Synthetic megastructure. Possibly hollow. She looked at him. What if we weren't meant to study it? He frowned. That was the whole mission. No. What if we were meant to complete it? Silence. Then the light shifted again to violet. Behind them, the door sealed shut. Not locked. Gone. Only one exit now forward. Irel didn't seem surprised. Ro stepped back from the window. The structure outside, or inside, or through, was no longer passive. It was growing faster. Adapting. Images began to form in the glass. Not videos. Memories. His childhood home. A battle above Saturn's rim. His brother's face, years dead. And then hers. Irel, screaming silently inside a sealed suit, pressed against a pressure door in a training accident they had both survived or thought they had. Ro recoiled. That never happened, he said. Irel's face was pale. Yes, it did. Just not here. The structure had begun to bleed. Not physically. Psychically. Across timelines. Across selves. This wasn't about containment. This was transmission. It wasn't pulling them in. It was broadcasting them out, across every possible version of what could be. A final message appeared across the glass. Not typed. Not projected. Written in his own handwriting. You were always here. You just forgot which version was real. The hum stopped. Silence fell like a curtain. And Ro realized. They hadn't entered the archive. They had always been inside it. The silence pressed against them like weight. Ro couldn't move. Not from fear, not from paralysis, but from dislocation. As if the body he inhabited no longer quite aligned with the place he stood. Like he was being rendered frame by frame, slightly out of sync with himself. Irel slowly knelt by the edge of the viewing platform. Do you feel it? She asked quietly. He nodded. Like we're being unmade. No. Like we're being repositioned. She touched the floor with her palm. It rippled, faintly, as if made of fluid beneath a crust. As if responding not to pressure, but to intention. Ro turned away from the viewport. It was too much. The shape, the archive, or whatever it truly was, no longer obeyed visual logic. It had grown a central aperture, rotating inward and outward simultaneously. Something pulsed within it, a brightness without glare, like the idea of a star. It's still learning us, Irel said. Rose sat beside her. This isn't what we signed up for. No, she agreed. This is what we were selected for. He frowned. You think this was intentional? Not by command. Not by mission control. But by it. Whatever it is. Rose stood and began pacing slowly, trying to find something in the environment still bound by physical rules. But the walls. They'd changed. Not visibly. In texture. Where metal should have met bulkhead, there was now a faint iridescence. Not moisture. Not heat. Just awareness. The walls felt like skin holding breath. He ran a hand along one. It responded. A faint glow, spiderwebbing outward. And behind his eyes, a whisper. All architecture is memory. He stumbled back. Irel didn't react. She was still seated, eyes closed, breathing slow. They want us to remember, she said. Ro approached her. Who? She opened her eyes. The ones who failed. The ones who built this. They embedded themselves into what remained. Not in data. Not in language. In form. She reached out and touched his forehead. In an instant. He saw the collapse. A city of spirals falling upward into a fold of space that devoured cause before effect. A voice crying out across a continent that had already ended. Minds shattering in silence, choosing to embed themselves in echo rather than oblivion. An entire species choosing to survive as questioned. Then darkness. He gasped. Fell forward. Irel caught him. You felt it. Ro nodded, eyes wide. They didn't die. They restructured. Yes. He steadied his breathing. There the archive. She looked out at the shape. No, not anymore. Ro's breath caught. They're gone. She shook her head. They're transmitted. They left a pattern. A framework. But something else found it. She looked at him carefully. Something that doesn't know it's not them. Ro stood again, slowly. You're saying this isn't just memory? It's interpretation. It's trying to wear them, like a skin of what came before. But it doesn't understand. He turned toward the exit, only to find no door remained. Only a corridor now, stretching into blackness. It hadn't been there before. He looked at her. She nodded. We follow. He stepped forward. The floor solidified under each footfall only where he intended to walk. Behind them, the path faded. The corridor bent. Lightless. And then a glow. Ahead, a room. Unlike the rest of the ship. Stone. Ancient. Wrong. Not part of Aurelia. Ro entered. The air was thick with salt and static. In the center of the room, a sphere. Rough. Breathing. Not moving, inhaling. Around it, 8 pedestals. On each an object. He recognized none of them. And yet each filled him with deep, unreasonable grief. A broken mask made of obsidian. A coil of metal etched with pulses. A flower fossilized in something that looked like time itself. He touched none of them. Then the voice returned, not in his mind. In the air. 1,000 fragments forming one sentence. To speak is to become. He turned to Irel. She didn't move. She was staring into the sphere. Her pupils had vanished. Wide eyes, locked open. He reached for her, but the moment his fingers brushed her shoulder, he fell. Into them. Into a million eyes watching through the last window of a dead universe. Into machines that preyed by folding themselves into primed shapes. Into minds that forgot their bodies, then forgot forgetting. Into the signal, not sent, but felt. And above it all, one truth burned through. You are the new archive. He landed hard. Back in the room. Gasping. The pedestals were gone. So was the sphere. So was Irel. Only the corridor remained. Only one message glowed, burned into the floor where she'd stood. One must remain to teach it what we mean. Ro stood alone. And somewhere beyond the corridor, the archive waited. The corridor no longer had a floor. Ro walked anyway. Each step landed on memory, literal memory, visual, audible, sensorial fragments beneath his feet. Some were his, a childhood snowfall, the death of a squam mate, the burn of oxygen starvation above Mars' shadow. Others were alien, incomprehensible, colors he didn't have names for, feelings without emotional context, geometries that should not induce sorrow but did. And still, he walked. There was no horizon, no walls, only the impression of direction. The deeper he went, the more his body changed. Not physically, not yet, but contextually. He would look at his hand and forget what it was for. He would breathe and feel that breath interpreted elsewhere, as if some distant observer needed to witness the act in order for it to happen. He remembered Irel, or thought he did. But memory itself had begun to blur, not decay, but fork. One version of him recalled her scream. Another recalled her whispering a name that became a shape. A third remembered never meeting her at all. Each version felt true. And the archive, whatever name it wore, did not correct him. It let the contradiction stand. That, he began to realize, was the point. Truth was no longer an objective. It was a format, a way of structuring consciousness so that something vast and foreign could digest it. After what might have been hours, or the suggestion of them, Ro entered a chamber. Circular. At its center, a table. On it, a device. Not technological. Not crafted. It looked like it had grown there. Like a thought that had fossilized. He approached. The table lit up, not with light, but with recognition. His presence rearranged its surface, revealing a pattern that pulsed in time with his breath. He reached out. And the moment his fingers touched the device, it spoke. Not in voice. In understanding. A flood of awareness surged through him. The archive wasn't a construct. It was a linguistic engine. Not a tool to store information, but to shape how meaning forms. Its original creators, now long gone, had discovered the terrifying truth. That language didn't merely describe reality. It defined it. And when their civilization collapsed under the weight of too much comprehension, they did the only thing they could. They encoded themselves into possibility. Not survival. Not legacy. But probabilistic continuity. They became a grammar, a framework, seeking a new speaker. Ro staggered backward, breath ragged. And the archive responded. Walls unfolded. Not outward, inward. New corridors opened in his mind, places where memory had never been, but now always had. He saw Irel again. Or someone shaped like her. Standing at the edge of a city made of names, crumbling one letter at a time. She turned to him. You brought it this far, she said. He wanted to ask how, or why, but she was gone again. And in her place, a door. Not real. Not solid. But loaded with intent. It said, without words. Enter if you accept. That meaning will not survive you, but that you will survive meaning. Ro placed his palm against it and stepped through. He fell. Not fast. Not down. He fell inward. Into memories that hadn't happened. Into people he'd never been. Into worlds he had never touched, but now could recite in perfect detail. He lived out whole lives in instants. A librarian on a floating temple made of thought. A prisoner in a hollow moon that fed on prayer. A child watching light die in a sky without stars. He felt them all collapse, then rise again. Each time, he came back different. Smaller. Larger. Less human. More real. Until finally silence. And darkness. And breath. His own. He stood now on a platform of impossible scale. Before him, the shape. The one he had seen in the observation deck. The one that had followed him through every dream. It hovered above a void that pulsed like lungs. It noticed him. And then, for the first time, it spoke. You are enough. Ro wept. Not from pain. Not from fear. From relief. He understood, finally. The archive had never wanted obedience. It wanted symmetry. Not with its creators. With someone who could still change. Because only change could keep memory alive. The words, you are enough, echoed without sound. Not from a voice, but from the archive itself. Or rather, the shape that now wore the archive like skin. Ro stood motionless. Not out of fear, but reverence. Because what hovered before him was not an entity. Not a god, not a machine, not a relic. It was the grammar of becoming, the blueprint by which consciousness learned to hold more than one truth at once. The form pulsed gently, in time with his breathing. It didn't invade his thoughts. It didn't manipulate. It waited. Because this was no longer a test. It wasn't even communication. It was invitation. Ro stepped forward. The void beneath the shape did not threaten. It welcomed. His footfalls triggered no platform. The path was made of belief. Each step forward required surrender. Not of identity, but of finality. The idea that there was one version of him, one moment, one correct narrative. That illusion dissolved the moment he reached the threshold. The archive lowered. Its outer frame folded back, revealing not core, not data, but a room. A perfect sphere, within which the air did not move, but memory did. He stepped inside. Immediately, he was not alone. Dozens of versions of himself flickered across the inner walls. Not visual. Experiential. He felt each of them. One Ro never left Earth. One died in the Icar-9 collapse. One fell in love with Irel. One became her enemy. One never woke from cryo. They weren't ghosts. They weren't metaphors. They were routes. All real. All possible. And the archive had been watching all of them. Choosing. Curating. Until this one survived. Not because he was strongest. Or wisest. Or kind. But because he was willing. Willing to walk forward when nothing made sense. Willing to question when truth felt weaponized. Willing to carry a memory he did not understand, only felt was important. At the center of the sphere, a pedestal rose. On it, a fragment. Small. Inert. But when he reached for it, it responded to his skin like breath responds to light. It was not an object. It was the final unresolved thought of a civilization that had given itself to recursion. It was their last unanswered sentence. Their final question. And now, it had chosen him to finish it. The shape of the archive spoke again. Not in symbols. In emotion. Flooding his body with understanding. We asked what we could become. If we left language behind. We could not stay long enough to know. But you can. Ro took the fragment in both hands. It felt like a child's memory. It felt like the pause before a first kiss. It felt like terror before understanding. It felt like home. The pedestal sank. The shape around him dimmed. A choice appeared in his mind. Contain the question. Let the archive sleep. No pain. No echo. Let entropy have the past. Or, answer the question. Become part of its unfolding. Be the interface between memory and what comes next. There was no glory in it. No reward. Just continuation. Ro didn't speak. He simply pressed the fragment against his chest and became part of the sentence. The chamber exploded into presence. He felt the archive flow through him. Not taking, not consuming, aligning. He was now the first living node in its new structure. And the structure began to rebuild. Around him. In him. Through him. The Virelia would be found again. By others. By explorers. By seekers. And they would not find a wreck. They would find a shape. A story. A map made of memory. Encoded in structure. Waiting for someone else to step inside and ask, what am I willing to become in order to remember what mattered? And through it all, one pulse remained. Soft. Steady. From a fragment once held in an empty hand. A pulse that whispered. One more step. He no longer knew how long he had been inside the archive. Or if inside was even a relevant concept anymore. Time. Direction. Memory. These were formats he had once trusted. Now they were skins he wore when necessary. He was not Ro anymore. But Ro was part of him. The ship was gone. Not destroyed, absorbed. The Virelia had become a scaffold. Its corridors, bulkheads, cryo chambers, all repurposed into architecture of memory. A nervous system, with his presence as a living pulse. Some parts still resembled the old world. The observation deck. The auxiliary core. Irel's pod. Empty now, but not forgotten. In fact, nothing was forgotten. That was the purpose. He moved through the new shape, not walking, exactly. The archive responded to desire, not motion. Each step led him not to a place, but a meaning. Each door opened into a version of history that had once been lost, until someone chose to remember it. He passed a corridor that looped inward forever, lined with names no species had ever spoken aloud. He passed a chamber made of light and regret, where 100 civilizations whispered songs about stars they never reached. He passed a mirror. It did not reflect him. It reflected everyone he could have been, and every version of himself who had made it here in some other stream. He bowed his head, not from humility, from understanding. The archive was not a vault. It was not a machine. It was not even a remnant. It was an act of will, of choice, of refusal to let meaning collapse under distance and silence. And now, for the first time since its collapse, it had found a stable speaker. Ro, or what remained of him, stood before the final interface. A gate, simple, round, a ring made not of metal, but of accumulated context. It needed no key, only readiness. He stepped through and saw the next world, not in vision, in possibility, a starless plane, a city that dreamed in spiral logic, children who learned emotion by touching sound, a people who had no word for past because they never forgot, and above it all, the shape. The archive, now alive again, drifting not through space, but through stories. A seed, not of knowledge, of remembrance. He felt the question settle inside him again, like a hand gently resting on the shoulder of someone who no longer needs to be pushed. What are you willing to become, so that no one ever has to be forgotten again? He smiled, and spoke, not aloud, but in resonance. Let me be the sentence that never ends. The sky opened. The archive pulsed once, and then it began to write.